Alright, hit the button, so I guess I'm making a video. Wasn't going to make this video, but, I really don't. This eagle eye guy, right? So he has his family in a banner, which is really weird. Especially when they're kind of ugly. Anyway, okay, anyway, so he calls himself educator of politics and economics. It's not even a very good sentence, actually. Welcome to my classroom. So that's how he describes himself, this eagle eye guy. So he makes this video. Yeah, he's gotten a little fatter, apparently. Anyway, talking about the minimum wage. And, I don't think there's much I need to bother playing. Maybe I'll just play the end. But, just the cliche rag. Like, get a real job, kind of crap, not really conceding to anything that's changed over the last 40 years. I mean, kind of a dramatic change in how the world is owned, who owns it, and, how much power workers have lost in those 40 years. The working Joe guy, which is kind of a lost thing. It's just gone. The middle class is dead. I mean, it's just been eviscerated. And so, I mean, you have these different things that have happened. Okay, women in the workforce. So now you got families working 2 jobs and still failing. Then you have this imported desperation all over the place. Not only exporting jobs, but importing, desperate workers. And then you have the whole industrialization taking its next stage, which is the automation and the replacement of a lot of low-skilled jobs. So now you do have to acquire some kind of skill to run the machine. You have to be able to drive the truck competently. I guess I'd add there's like another element to this. Is sort of like the specialization kind of element. Where the big money, it's like everything has become almost like professional sports or something, or sports in general, right? It's all or nothing. It's like celebrity. It's all or nothing. If you're not a big celebrity, then you'll barely survive. If you're not a Major League Baseball player, yeah, everything else is kind of, you're going to die. You're not going to make a living playing baseball. And it's sort of becoming like that in a lot of fields, where all the money is just ends up in some sort of lottery system, essentially, where 10% of the people that have the skill are making all the money, and the 80% or whatever, the lower percentage, is, doesn't have anything of value they can trade. You could sort of see that in programming. And you can see it in a lot of these industries because of the way the companies compete with each other. They tends to be by invitation only. So it's like if you want to, the amount, if you say if you kind of thought you had some real skills when it came to gaming software or something, yeah, you sort of have to be invited by them, to play along, to have a job. And you can't really prove yourself in any real way, in a lot of ways, until you really produce something. You actually have to produce something, so you have to have enough money or hardware or time to actually produce something so substantial that they can't ignore you, kind of thing. And who can do that? So it's almost like some fields are kind of closed off. You can almost argue that, the only real competition for doctors, I mean, even doctors are feeling it because we're importing doctors. But yeah, I mean, in foreign countries, it's easier to go to medical school than it is in this country. It's cheaper, it's more practical, it's more attainable to more people. And so they can produce more doctors. And the same is true for airline pilots. I mean, they're sort of becoming bus drivers now. And the competition gets kind of heavy. So anyway, there's just no acceptance or recognition of how much the world has changed. and how unless we are going to sit there and be really careful about how we construct people, how we migrate people into jobs, it's really stupid to just sit there and say go to school or something. Because you don't need a huge increase in the number of software engineers or some other thing to all of a sudden create a glut that just destroys everybody's wages again. And so I think this argument's kind of just garbage, that there doesn't need to be a minimum wage increase just for ethical reasons alone, but as a practical fact, I mean, you should be paying people who are productive, and you pay them based on their productivity. And obviously, I think a lot of people being paid minimum wages, say somebody who's cleaning up in a nursing home or something, they deserve a bigger cut, okay? Because they are producing more productivity in the real world. They're making it practically possible. And it's just nonsense to exploit the fact that it's not high-skilled labor. It's labor. It's not fun work. I guess that's part of it. It's just this whole insensitivity to the amount of work. I mean, many minimum wage jobs are a tremendous amount of work. They're hard work. They can compromise the hell out of your body. I had a few of those, in restaurants and delivering newspapers and other bullshit, and I just, I did real damage to myself physically, working those below minimum wage jobs. And that was kind of just bullshit. And this guy would like everybody to be driven into those holes, because he thinks he's immune somehow. Now, he doesn't say what he does. Who the hell knows? So he's just sitting there saying, I made all the right decisions, I've got a good life, and if you don't, it's because you're an asshole or an idiot or fuck ass, this kind of bullshit. And another thing he doesn't even acknowledge is there's a ton of people working minimum wage jobs now. You can see them. Go ahead and look. And they're deficient. These are broken people. All right, they're disabled either physically or mentally. They're broken, and you're just exploiting them. You're exploiting them. I mean, what other word for that is it? It's like exploiting child labor or something. It's just disgusting that you would take advantage of people who are desperate because they're disabled, and you're going to take advantage of that. You're going to steal productivity from them and not compensate them fairly just because there's a lot of them, and call yourself a decent human being. Well, I don't think you're decent. I think you're grotesque. I think you're a monster. So anyway, these people just seem to have no, they just don't seem to have any appreciation. And this one guy commented, let's see, that's not the guy, but he made some kind of, the typical snarky shit. As someone who used to work for McDonald's, I can say that indeed it is a low-skilled job. I've worked my way up through various restaurants. I don't know exactly what that means. And I'm now making good, and I'm now making good money now. And I'm making good money now. People just want it all from the start and don't want to work for anything. See, I just don't think you would say that. Is that what you would? So when you were being fundamentally exploited, okay, and you were working 8 hours for shit wages in a lousy, stinking, cruddy environment, you thought that's what you deserved. That's how you saw it. You deserved to be exploited. You deserved McDonald's to steal productivity from you, make big money for the corporation and the executives and the management, and that you do all the work and they get all the money. And you thought that was the way the world should be. I don't think so. So I just don't believe these people. I don't believe people. I don't really think you could work hard jobs and not have some appreciation, hard jobs for bad money, and not have some respect for the fact that it's just fundamentally wrong, and that minor ways of correcting for it, um, there should be some recognition. Right, the other thing this guy doesn't talk about either is the fact that, of course prices have gone way up and all these other kind of crap, and the percentage of your income that has to be devoted to certain things has gone way up because, especially in real estate, that market is completely fucked up. So housing costs have gone way up because we're bidding against how much money the bankers will put into mortgages, right? So in the last 50 years, the amount of money, the amount of the housing assets that are actually owned by the people living in the house has diminished. I mean, the number of people who claim to be owning a house has gone up, but the amount of house they actually own has gone way down. So they don't really own these things anymore. So you're bidding for something based on how much the bankers will put into it, and all that will decide what rents are going to be and all these other things. So it has distorted markets because there's a bunch of investment capital, and it's essentially now rental agreements. So some basic infrastructure of life now we're renting instead of buying, like cars and all this other stuff. People are renting cars, they're not really owning cars. And that aspect of what it takes to survive now is also another factor in how much money it takes to survive. That changes the equation. But I mean, the huge change is just the fact that it's a lie to think there's enough jobs for everyone, because there isn't, not unless you fundamentally change the economy. And that's the real problem. That's the thing we got to fix, is this idea of how the very structure of how people work. And so now we're just turning everybody into servants and calling it a service economy because the wealthy have excess funds to buy slaves, essentially, at a cheap rate. And that's what creates jobs. They're not creating jobs, they're hiring slaves. And there's a big difference. But the only people there's only a tiny percentage of the workforce that does all the productive work. Like I said, and most of them are not making a huge amount of money. But what does it take to get a bridge built? What does it take to get internet infrastructure? What does it take to cure you at the hospital? These are the people that are doing real work in the world. The people picking your crops for even less than the minimum wage. Those are the people that are doing all the productive work, and all these other assholes are just sitting on top of it, manipulating that labor for profit based on what part of that labor they own, or what part of that labor they can negotiate with somebody else, or who they can take advantage of. And I wonder what this guy's racket is. Is he selling old pencils to some dumbass government employee and calling himself an entrepreneur? I mean, I wonder what his racket is. And I'm going to call it a racket. I'm just betting this guy doesn't do something called productive work. I'm betting he doesn't make anything or produce anything or provide any value added whatsoever. I'm betting that he just bleeds the system. He parasitically feeds off of the inefficiencies in the system. He just resells something he takes something from here and takes a profit to sell it to some asshole over here who's too stupid to figure out to buy it directly from the source. He seems like the type. But yeah, just this arrogance of thinking, oh yeah, I made all the right decisions in my life, and you're going to point your finger at somebody else who made a wrong decision. Thought they could do something and went to college and dropped out and blah 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 blah, and you're going to just sit there and point your finger at them and say, what? Start over? Well, they can't start over. And in this current economy, I mean, maybe the thing to do is to have preposterous debt, because nobody's going to be able to pay any of this stuff back anyway. But I mean, it wouldn't be ethical to say that, would it? You know. So what are you going to suggest? They work at McDonald's for 15 years, save up enough money, if possible, by living in some shanty town, to be able to go to school for 2 years, so that they might be able to double their wages if they're lucky. You know, the economy is so unbalanced. The amount of money being, again, the productive workers are the only thing producing any value, and most of those are in China now, and they're just being manipulated by a bunch of owners, and you know, that's not an economy. That's a gulag, and you're just defending that, which makes you just kind of more disgusting on the inside than you are on the outside, which is kind of scary, to tell you the truth. Very scary. You know, I just have to reload it, you know, to play it, to do this YouTube thing. I mean, I shouldn't complain about those little flaws in YouTube, right? I mean, this is pretty, you know, it does work most of the time. But it's annoying that you have to fiddle with this crap.
Public schools spend over $23,000 per student,
Yeah,
and they can't even teach kids to read. Mayor Cory Booker promised to fix New York schools, but said he'd need even more money.
Yeah. Horrible political commercials. Oof. Oof.
So it's about 10-30.
Who cares what time it is?
By 10%, and that increases my operating costs by 7%.
Right. So
which means I don't know whether my profit margin.
I don't know whether he's talking about him being a businessman or whatever, or just using businessman as an example. But I'd love to hear that story if he owns a business. You know, another, you know, who you know, not what you know. But anyway, yeah, obviously if labor cost goes up, but it's all about what the competition, you know, this whole argument that if regulations go up, then probably, yeah, but it all has to do with the competitive environment. So if everything changes for everybody, if everybody's stuck with the same rules, then yeah, you just increase prices if you have to. But what you can also do is cut some of the profits. So those are the two choices, and it's just going to depend on how much business you can do doing one or doing the other. But again, we know that these workers deserve, nobody should work 8 hours a day and not be able to have a decent roof over their head, okay, and eat some decent food. I'm not saying they should be able to raise 4 kids. I'm just saying they should be able to live a decent life. And if you don't think so, then I think you just fucking suck. I mean, really, minimum wage jobs that are 8 hour a day, 40 hour a week kind of jobs are not something you think kids should do. And again, I don't even understand this whole concept that you think kids should work. I mean, it's bad enough you force them to go to school without paying them, but this whole idea that you expect them to do a bunch of inane, stupid jobs from which they really won't learn anything, just because they're cheap labor. I mean, they should mow your grass for half the price or a quarter of the price just because they're a kid, and you're going to feel like you didn't exploit the fuck out of them? Yeah, fuck you, you suck.
And now I'm making no money. I'm actually taking a loss. So what happens when that happens? Well, you increase my operating costs, that means I have to increase the price of everything. If this happens across the entire economy, an increase of 10% of everyone's operating costs means a price raise of 10% across the board, which means that brand spanking new minimum wage that, you know, is calculated to be able to actually let you live off of it based on the expenses you don't want to give up. Well, guess what? Now it can't allow you to live off of that minimum.
Oh yeah, whatever. That's inflation, right? And so that's another thing, that's totally manipulatable based on how you play with other elements of a society, you know, and prices like interest rates and all these other things, which is another element I didn't even mention, right? I mean, it's not like the average Joe citizen can just put money in the bank and make money like the old days, right? They can't do that anymore. So it really does require, to make money, you really do have to like borrow money to make money, which is real. I mean, Google even borrows money just because it's fun. Okay, because they know the money that we're going to be paying back is going to be worth less than the money they borrowed. And so it just, yeah, it's a guaranteed winner. You'll pay less in interest than inflation will consume. And so, yeah, you win. You borrow real money, and then you pay it back in crap money. And that's the world we live in now. So it's a different world. And but anyway, yeah, obviously inflation's a problem. You gotta have checks against inflation. But we know where the real inflation has been, and that's in the prices of a CEO. Those are the jobs that have gone insanely, outrageously out of control. So we know that this high-end bullshit is where all the fraud and the fakery is. You know, this is a shell game that's being played. It's not an honest exchange of value. And a lot of that's the whole corporate structure and the whole corporate infrastructure. And the very fact is they're not going to let anything that looks anything like a threat to that infrastructure survive. It's kind of like just Bill Gates buying up anything that looks like competition. And that's the world we live in. And it's not efficient. It's very inefficient. And it's very just plainly unfair. Again, you're going to keep arguing that you have some right to exploit workers because there's too many of them. That gives you the right. You don't need anything else. That's all you need. Is there's too many of them of an insufficient skill level, so that means you can take advantage of them because they'll be desperate. And to me, that's just overtly not only is it not logically sound a reason to exploit. It doesn't have anything to do with deserve. I just don't think it's even socially productive. I mean, it's back to the Ford idea of you want to create a society where the people who are working can afford to buy the products that other workers are making. That's the world you want to live in. Not a world where you have two classes of people, you know, serfs and emperors. So anyway, fuck you, fatty, you suck. you just suck. There's nothing else to say. Ugh. This is why the human race is just forget about it. Forget about it. You know, you gotta have a little bit more humility there, buddy. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have some skills and lucky enough to be able to take advantage of that, you shouldn't feel too bad about giving somebody else another $1 or $2 an hour for sweating for you. But instead, you're just a petty motherfucking cunt. Anyway. So, hopefully you'll get yours. Yeah, it's a big enough piano. It's going to take a big piano, but yeah. I hope you get your piano.